Let's take a look at one of the strangest missing persons cases to go viral in recent years. This is the Tromp family road trip. It all started back in Australia in 2016. This is footage of the Tromp family from Brisbane, Australia. There was the mother, Heidi, the father, Daniel, and their two kids, 7-year-old Matthew and 9-year-old Thomas. They were an average family living an average life in a middle-class neighborhood. But everything changed after this clip was posted online. In this footage, the kids are sitting in the back seat of the car and they're arguing over who gets to be the first to use a tablet. The argument gets pretty heated, and it escalates into full-on screaming. Then, suddenly, Dad, Daniel, steps in and tells them to get out of the car and run as fast as they can. And that's exactly what they do. So far, so good, right? Seems like just a normal dose of tough love parenting. But that's not what happened next. Instead of running away from the car, the kids ran away from home. They disappeared without a trace. Daniel and Heidi immediately reported their kids missing, and they cooperated fully with the police investigation. But when cops started digging into the family's background, things got a bit more complicated. Daniel and Heidi had been involved with the police before. Specifically, they had been arrested for child neglect several times. When cops searched the house, they found conditions that would make any adult break down and cry. There were bugs everywhere. There were dirty dishes everywhere. The house was a hoarder situation, and according to the police, both kids had severe lice. To make matters even worse, neither parent had called 110 when their kids went missing. Instead, they waited 5 hours before calling the police. So they were arrested for child neglect once again, and the police began searching for the children. It was obvious that Matthew and Thomas weren't outside playing. Whoever took them knew where they were going, and they were unlikely to come back anytime soon. But the biggest mystery of all was where they went and why. We still don't know the answer to this question today. For a whole week, the parents put up massive amounts of money and handed out flyers, but nobody had seen the kids. Then something very strange happened. A woman named Carrie contacted the family and told them she had seen Matthew and Thomas in Las Vegas. Now, here's the thing. This was Australia. How could their kids be in the United States? And if they were there, why didn't they try to contact their parents? The parents were stumped, but they asked Carrie for more information. She told them that she'd seen the kids with a man. He appeared to be in his mid-40s. He was about 6 feet tall and he had gray hair. Carrie said the man had taken the kids to a hotel in Vegas, but she hadn't seen them since. Now, as far as the police were concerned, this was a dead end. If the kids really were in the United States, then they'd need to work with Interpol to track them down. And by that time, Matthew and Thomas would probably be living under new identities. But the parents weren't ready to give up just yet. They flew to Las Vegas and began searching the city for their kids. But while they were searching, something very strange happened. An anonymous tipster contacted the police and told them the kids had been found. According to this tipster, the kids were safe and sound in Utah. But when the police checked the house, the kids were gone. And no matter how much they searched, they couldn't find them anywhere. Meanwhile, the parents were going through old security footage and they discovered something disturbing. In this footage, we can see a silver Holden Commodore driving around the block. The kids had gotten out of school at 3:15 p.m., but this car had been circling the block at 2:55 p.m. In other words, someone had been stalking the kids for almost an hour. But who was this person? And why were they following the kids? Police checked in with the neighbors and they discovered something else. It turns out the entire neighborhood had been under surveillance. Someone had been watching the kids for months. A neighbor told the police that she'd noticed a silver Holden Commodore in the area several times before. She always assumed it was the same guy because he never left the car. The crazy part is she mentioned this to the police 6 months prior. But at the time, officers didn't think much of it. They figured it was just some creepy dude with nothing better to do. But now they weren't so sure. And as the investigation continued, things only got stranger. One day, a waitress at a local restaurant contacted the police. She told them that she'd served a man who looked just like the composite sketch. She also told them that he'd been accompanied by 2 kids who looked like Matthew and Thomas. This happened a couple of weeks ago. So the police were now dealing with a cold trail. But they had hope. If they could track this man down, then they'd be able to track down the kids. That's when Detective Inspector Bruce McNabb spoke out and begged the kidnapper to bring the kids back. He promised that he wouldn't go to jail if he returned them. But when he did, he should expect to face charges. Here's what's so strange. The police received dozens of calls from people all over the country saying they'd seen Matthew and Thomas. But every single time the police arrived at the scene, they were too late. The kids had already vanished again. In fact, the kids seemed to be traveling all over the United States. People spotted them in California, Nevada, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, and Arizona. Some people even claimed they'd seen them in Canada, but those sightings weren't confirmed. The kids were literally ghosts. They were impossible to track down. Then, in December, 2 months after they went missing, another waitress came forward. She told the police she'd seen the kids at a Denny's in Texas. She described the man they were with, and, thankfully, she remembered his license plate number. When the police ran it, they discovered it belonged to a Dodge Caravan. And when they tracked down the owner of the Dodge Caravan, it turned out to be a 68-year-old grandmother from South Dakota. Her name was Barbara, and she told the police she'd had no idea her rental car had been involved in a kidnapping. So now the police were hot on the trail. If they could track down this grandmother, then they'd be able to track down Matthew and Thomas. But when they reached her, she told them she'd last seen the kids in October. She'd lent her car to a friend, and that friend must have kidnapped the kids. So the police began searching the entire country for this mysterious friend. But every lead turned into a dead end. They never found the friend or the kids. Fast forward to July 2017. After a full year of searching, the kids were finally found. 2 hikers came across a campsite, and to their horror, they found 2 skeletons. The police confirmed it was Matthew and Thomas, but even today, we don't know what happened to them. As far as the investigation goes, it's still open. Police believe the kids died from exposure. They were found barefoot and without any blankets or shelter. But that still leaves the question, who kidnapped them and why? To this day, nobody knows. The Tromp family had a lot of problems. They were arrested for child neglect several times. Their house was a hoarding situation, and reports say that they were under investigation for possible abuse. But none of that makes any sense. Why would someone kidnap these kids and then leave them in the desert to die? Even the police were confused. They had no motive for the kidnapping and they never recovered any evidence. Today, the parents are still trying to find answers. They visited the gravesite every day and they've spent thousands upon thousands of dollars on psychics and mediums, but nobody has been able to tell them what happened. Matthew and Thomas were loving kids. They liked playing video games, going to carnivals, and hanging out with their friends. Here's Matthew. Here's Thomas. These are the faces of the missing kids. And this is the last picture anyone ever took of them. Do you think Matthew and Thomas are still alive? If so, where do you think they are? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time.